see them. Same for Sunday night. I want to remind you this Sunday night, first of all, the potluck sheet is out there. It is going to be alphabet soup potluck. So Bob explained that to me as this. There are 26 letters in the alphabet, English alphabet. There is a letter back there, A through Z, that you need to pick a letter and decide that's the kind of food you want to make. For example, A would be apple pie. B would be banana bread. C would be chocolate cake. You see where I'm focused on this? But, you pick your thing and make something with that letter, I guess beginning with that letter or something. But it's kind of fun. We're having a little fun with that. So pick whatever you want. I think Luke is going to try to take Z. Is he still trying to take Z? Oh, X. Yes, X. He was really working hard on X. So I don't know if Luke took X. But if somebody wants to take it, we can have 2 X dishes. I just don't know what it would be. So want to encourage you, this Sunday night we're going to begin the book of Revelation in the multi-purpose room. Also in the auditorium, Sam is going to begin with our men, teach any man that wants to come, male from young to old, about worship training. He's going to have a worship training class, and it is going to be, the nuts and bolts of serving God in a public capacity. Through prayer, scripture reading, devos, that song leading, that type of Lord's Supper, that type of thing. So make sure that you're in one of those 2 classes. It's going to be maybe hard for some to choose, but here's what I recommend. I recommend if a man doesn't know which one to choose, take Sam's class, because we can always use leaders in the church. Revelation we'll get to, and I can give you the notes from it. So if you're a man on the fence, which one to come to, you want to study the book of Revelation, you want to go to men's training, come to men's training, and I'll make sure that you get the notes for the book of Revelation. It's going to be an exciting study. I've been putting the material together for many, many years in my study, and I've shared some of it throughout the years, but I've got some really great material that I want to share on the book of Revelation. It's exciting. It's really going to be a great, great study. So remember that. Also back there is a nursery attendant sign-up sheet. So what we're looking for are some ladies that are willing to rotate in and out of the attended nursery on Sunday mornings. So if we can have 12 ladies sign up, that means you'll only do it for 1 time a year, 1 month a year. And so we've got busy bags that will be explained to you. You'll have training if you want it. Whatever you need, it'll be taken care of. So that'll be for the attended nursery. Back there, the sign-up sheet is on that program. So make sure you sign up for that, ladies, if you want to be a part of that. Okay. Is there anything else that is missing that I need to make mention of? Yes. Corn maze, thank you. Corn maze on Sunday for the junior and senior youth. If you're a junior youth, please bring an adult. Or if you behave like a child, please bring an adult. So I'll be bringing Jolene with me. So that's going to be corn maze time on Sunday after our morning worship. Pizza, I believe, in the multi-purpose room, and then we'll head out to the corn maze. So if you're doing that, please sign up so they know how many exactly is going. All right. Fantastic. Great to see you tonight. Hope you've had a good week so far, and looking forward to a great encouragement from the book of Ecclesiastes. Let's go ahead and go to God in prayer, and then we'll dismiss. Father, we thank you so much for your love and your mercy. We thank you for your grace that you just continue to bestow upon us, your favor and your providential care. Father, you're an awesome God, and we love you, and we pray for strength that we might continue on to be the kind of people we need to be. Help us not to give in to the tempter. Help us to be strong in the hour of temptation, and please deliver us from the evil one. Father, help us to bring our thoughts into the captivity, into the obedience of Christ. Help us to control our thoughts through good, positive thoughts from your word and from prayer and from encouraging one another. Help us to do our part to share the gospel. Help us to be light and to be salt. Please bless our study tonight. Bless our young people as they'll be going to Bible study as well. Just help us to fill ourselves with your word that we might not sin against you. We love you and we honor you, and we ask for safe journeys as we leave later on this evening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, youngins, go ahead to Bible class. We are in a new study tonight, beginning the book of Ecclesiastes. That being said, does anybody need an outline for tonight's class? Just put up your hand and let me know if you do. All right. Dwight needs one. Stephen, please. Okay. Does anybody else need an outline? Need two more up here. Stephen and Sadie. Stephen. Okay. All right. Does anybody else need an outline? All right, so this is going to be our first outline in the series of the book of Ecclesiastes. I think you're going to find this book exciting and encouraging, although some, when they begin to study the book of Ecclesiastes, think it's a depressing book. But it's not if we look at it through the proper eyes. We have to look at it through the proper eyes in order to really understand what is going on here. So let's lay out some introductory material before we jump into the outline that you have. A little bit of this will be introductory, and then I'll make mention of it when we get to the outline part. All right. So it's a fascinating study, but some think it's a melancholy study of the book of Ecclesiastes because when they think of this book, it's kind of a doom and gloom book at the onset. It looks like, oh, why even live? I mean, everything we do is just vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Others will look at it as a book of depression, and they don't give it the attention it deserves. In fact, I met a man one time, I remember very clearly. He wouldn't study 2 books of the Bible. He was a Bible-believing man. He wasn't a New Testament Christian, but he was a Bible-believing man, and he read his Bible. He's a prolific Bible reader. He would not study the book of Job, and he would not study the book of Ecclesiastes. And in order for a man to take that position, he really doesn't understand what those 2 books are about. You just don't understand it. And that's why I want to jump into the book of Ecclesiastes. Our theme for this series of studies will be finding meaning in a meaningless world. We need this. We need encouraged as to what is really important. Solomon's going to do that for us. The world is focused upon materialism, popularity, sensual desires, and everything like it. And so Ecclesiastes is going to be a book that we need to study in order to give us the proper perspective on those things, on the meaning of life, we might say. So here is your first little blank on your outline. Ecclesiastes was written around 950 BC. 950 BC. That was near the end of Solomon's life. Now, tell me real quickly in a capsulated form, who was Solomon? Give me something you know about Solomon. Son of David. What else you know about Solomon? Third king of the United Kingdom. Saul, then the lineage or the kingship was ripped from his lineage because he disobeyed God. David, Solomon, third king of the United Kingdom. What else you know about Solomon? He did. He built the temple. Very good. He built the first temple to God in Jerusalem. Brought all kinds of goodies. Cedars of Lebanon. He brought pearl. He brought all different kinds of things because he had the money. David prepared a lot of that material. Solomon carried it out. What else you know about him? Very wise. Where did he get his wisdom at, Allie? God. God. Do you know why he got his wisdom or how he got his wisdom? Well, that's good. You're on the right track. It wasn't a wish. It was a request of God. So basically, God was going to basically give him about anything he wanted. And he said, what do you really want, Solomon? And Solomon said, I want an understanding heart to judge the people. Now, what we usually encapsulate that as wisdom. And it is wisdom. He said, I want an understanding heart to judge the people. God said, because you asked for that, and not lands and houses and gold and silver and all these things, I'm going to give you wisdom, but I'm also going to give you all that other stuff. Solomon was a very, very rich man. In fact, when the Queen of Sheba came halfway around the world to visit some of Solomon's building projects and some of his vast wealth, she said, I'm telling you, I heard about this, but the half hath not been told. I mean, I haven't heard half of what you really have here, Solomon. You're a very wealthy man. And he got that wealth from God. At the end of his life, he looks back on his life. So he's like looking back, 2020, hindsight, and he's saying, what was it all really worth? What was this worth? All right, so just quick Bible trivia to go along with this. What other 2 books did Solomon, the wise man, write? Proverbs. Yeah, wisdom. Wisdom just comes out of the Proverbs. Absolutely. Song of Solomon. The greatest love story for a man and a woman to study together in married life is the Song of Solomon. It talks about this beautiful Shunammite woman who he looked at and just absolutely adored, which is ironic because this man that wrote the Song of Solomon, one woman was his special treasure, had 700 wives, 300 lesser wives or concubines, but he still had one that was the apple of his eye. I bet she felt really special, didn't she? He only had 1,000 other ones to choose from. But Solomon regretted that. He regretted having that many wives. We're going to see it. We're going to see it in this book. He regretted a lot of things he did. Young people, this book's for you. It's an antiquated book. You say, oh, this is antiquated. It's Old Testament. It's written a long time ago. Fresh as the day it was written today. It's fresh. Because what it does is it takes everything the world seeks after, and he says, I'm telling you, if that's what you live your life for, you're wasting it. You're wasting your life. I've wasted much of mine, he said. James.
Well, those wives also led astray.
Absolutely. Absolutely, James. Great point. And you know, when the Bible uses the word strange, the old King James uses the word strange, Solomon had a bunch of strange wives. He doesn't mean they were really strange. They were unauthorized. The idea they're strange means unauthorized. God did not authorize that. That goes back to my sermon on Sunday, although I'm not going to camp on it. Make sure you be careful who you marry. Young person, Christian, marry a faithful Christian. Don't go astray with that. Don't ever compromise that. Solomon will tell you not to. So if you don't believe me, believe him. All right? So, near the end of his life, he's looking back, and by inspiration's pen, he writes these 12 great chapters. All right, the address. Let's look at the address, and I'm basically dealing with the title when I say the address. In the Hebrew Bible, it has a Hebrew word that is kol aleph. Kol aleph, I think I'm pronouncing that right, doesn't really matter, but it simply means the words of the preacher. Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 1, it begins with what? The words of the preacher. In the Septuagint, does anybody remember what the Septuagint is? Greek translation of the Old Testament Hebrew Scriptures was done in the silent period of 400 silent years between Malachi and Matthew, somewhere in that time frame is when it was translated by 70 scholars, and so you'll see it abbreviated LXX. 70 scholars translated it, brought Hebrew into Greek. In the Septuagint, it is called Ecclesiastes, what we have in our English Bible, and it literally means preacher. Now, here's kind of a little neat tie-in. Ecclesiastes comes from a word that we probably have heard, is ekklesia. You might have heard it ecclesia. It's actually an epsilon, or an eta, not an epsilon, so it's actually ecclesia. People look at me strange when I do it that way, but that's the actual pronunciation of it. Ecclesia is an assembly or a called out, the word from which we get our word, church, an assembly, called out of the world. So that idea is really what the title suggests, Ecclesiastes. That's what it means. Called out, but it's a form of Ecclesiastes in the Greek, which means the preacher. All right, the authorship. Let's talk a little bit about the authorship. Jewish tradition and early church tradition ascribe the authorship to Solomon. Now, understand that Jewish tradition and early church tradition is not binding by way of authority, but it is interesting to look and see what those that were close to this time frame, 950 BC, who they said wrote it. Sometimes it's good for reflection. Doesn't give us authority biblically, but it does help us to kind of unpackage this deal. The author identifies himself as the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Chapter 1 and verse 1, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. So at the very first onset, we probably think, hey, this is probably Solomon. But what's interesting is, if there's an opportunity for somebody to fight about the Bible, they'll fight about it. And there's a bunch of people, not a bunch, but there are a few people that just want to take exception to anybody that says Solomon wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. So let's look at some internal references as to why we think Solomon wrote it. Number one, his wisdom. So let's just look at a couple of passages. Ecclesiastes 1 and verse 16. I said to myself, behold, I have magnified and increased wisdom more than all who were over Jerusalem before me. My mind has observed a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. If you go back to 1 Kings, I'm using a little different Bible tonight, so you'll just have to bear with me. 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 12. 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 12, behold, I have done according to your words. Behold, I have given you a wise and discerning heart, so that there has been no one like you before, nor shall one be like you arise after you. God is talking to Solomon there in 1 Kings 3, and he's saying, there's no one been before like you in your wisdom, and there's no one going to be after you like you in your wisdom. And then when when the writer gets to Ecclesiastes 1 and 16, he says, you know what? I had more wisdom than they that were before me, than they that were after me. Who do you think wrote it? I mean, we can fight about it if you want to, but I'm not sure why we would. I think Solomon wrote it. I think it's pretty clear that he wrote it. His building projects. Look at Ecclesiastes 2, verses 4 through 6. This is amazing. When we get to this section to really delve into it, we're going to see some great stuff. I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself, and I planted in all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. He did all these building projects. He just landscape, just beautiful stuff. Now, this may not mean a ton to us, but if you think about what he's saying here, in our time frame, it's a little easier to dig a pond because we have machinery. But can you imagine the expense it would cost to dig? Do you know what it costs to dig a pond today? I mean, I'm not looking for a number, but it's expensive. It's expensive. When I was in Kentucky, I had one of our brethren down there, a friend of mine, he just dug a pond. And he said he started out this big, and it ended up being this big. And he said, you would not believe the money. He never did tell me. I didn't want to know. But he said, you would not believe the money I have just in that digging that pond. There was a spring there. He dug the pond, put an overflow in it, and the next thing you know, he's like taking out a loan to get the thing dug. I mean, it's huge cost. Just the ponds alone show what he did. Fruit trees. You know, the price of fruit trees. In today's world, I'm sure he didn't, order from Stark Brothers or somewhere like that. But they weren't cheap. So, I mean, we're talking a lot of money, and he planted groves, vineyards, all this stuff. So it shows that he was very wealthy. His building projects, 1 Kings 7, 1 through 12, talks about some of those building projects. I gave you the cross-reference there. So his wisdom, his building, number 3, his wealth. Ecclesiastes 2, 7 through 9. I bought male and female slaves. I had homeborn slaves. I also possessed flocks and herds larger than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men, many concubines, 300 to be exact. Can you imagine, fellas, what it would cost him to keep? And I don't mean this facetiously. It's a little bit amusing, but can you imagine what it would cost to keep 1,000 women? 700 wives and 300 concubines? Can you imagine just the makeup bill in that? And the perfume bill? Don't think that that's absurd, because it's not. You go read the Song of Solomon, you'll see. The Shunammite woman, I mean, she fixed herself up. She dialed herself up all the time. He really liked it. He liked that sweet-smelling frankincense and myrrh and aloes and everything else she put on. I mean, can you imagine the bill? This guy had wealth. He was rich. And 2 Chronicles 9, 13 to 28 talks about some of that wealth of Solomon. So because of that, we look at the authorship, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, pretty safe to say Solomon was the human penman that God used to write this. Now, ultimately, we know that this was inspired of God, which makes it binding, which makes it absolutely authoritative. But what's amazing to me is not only does it have the stamp of God's approval on it, it also has the experience of Solomon. So what he's saying, he couldn't make a mistake in what he was writing, but not only that, he's saying, man, I'm telling you, I've done this. This has been my life. Listen to the preacher. Okay, not this preacher. Listen to the preacher. What he's going to say really is going to affect us. It's really going to help us. All right, let's look at the approach. The approach. What do we need to keep in mind as we approach the book? Here's a blank for you. Please remember this blank on your outline. Write it in, the word vanity. Vanity, vanity, vanity. Vanity is used 37 times in most English translations of the scriptures in the book of Ecclesiastes. Why? Because everything is vanity. Now take that word and hold on to it for a minute. Don't get depressed. Because the next part is important to tie with that part to really understand the book of Ecclesiastes. The next word I want you to remember is under the sun. It's used 29 times. So let's look at the approach of the book. What are we going to understand? Everything is vanity under the sun. So is everything vanity? Is what we're doing here tonight vanity? Vain? Useless? No. No. But you go out and build you vineyards. You go out and make $1 million. You go out and marry 700 women, have 300 lesser wives. It is nothing but vanity. Everything is vanity, vain, empty under the sun. Now, we're going to add a little to that as we go, so don't be too doomy and gloomy, because the next part we're going to tie with that. Vanity, under the sun. Third thing I want you to notice is the meaning of life without God. He begins the book by talking about meaning of life without God. Look at Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 24. I don't know if you do memory work. I don't know if you want to do memory work. If you want to memorize anything from the book of Ecclesiastes, here's kind of how I do memory work. What I do is the book I'm studying, I try to pull out some key verses and I try to remember those verses. I put them on little note cards and then I try to remember them. If you're going to do note cards in the book of Ecclesiastes, there's two main verses I'd want you to remember. Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 4 is the first one. 24. There is nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor's good. This also I've seen, that it is from the hand of God. Now remember, this is early on in the book. And he's saying, what's it all worth? He said, I'll tell you what, you might as well enjoy what you have here on this earth. You might as well enjoy it to the fullest ability. Because I'm telling you right now, after this life, that stuff doesn't matter. It's kind of like the old phrase, if you're going to live a worldly life, you may as well live it up. Because that's all you have. There's nothing after that. Now, I hope you understand what I'm about to say. I understand it in its context. That is why I've made the statement publicly, and I stand behind this statement. If I am not going to be a full-time, faithful child of God, I am going to be a heathen. I'm not going to be a lukewarm Christian. I made that decision about 26 years ago. I'm not going to be a lukewarm Christian. It's not going to get me anywhere. I have enough Christianity. I love James's illustration on Sunday night. You guys that were here heard it. I don't want enough Christianity to make me miserable. Okay? If I'm going to be a child of God, I'm going to do the best I can at it. I'm going to fall, but I'm going to do the best I can. If I'm not going to be a child of God, I'm going to be a heathen. I'm going to live it up. I'm going to go have me fun because that's all I have left. That's all it is. That might sound like a real shock. That's exactly what Solomon's saying. Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 24, you might as well just take the work of your labor and really live it up, he says. Really enjoy it. That's early on in the book. Solomon, what do you say later on? Let's go to the second passage I want you to see. Meaning of life with God. Ecclesiastes 12. Here's the second verse that if you're memorizing any verses in the book of Ecclesiastes, here it is. Ecclesiastes 12 verses 13 and 14. The conclusion, when all has been heard. By the way, I'm reading from the New American Standard Version. I normally do King James or New King James, but I love the New American Standard in the Old Testament. That's one of the reasons I'm using it tonight. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep His commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So at the beginning of the book, he says, you may as well just go make a bunch of money and live it up. Why? Because he's saying life without God, that's all you have. But at the end of the book, and we're going to see this as we journey through the book, he says, I'm telling you, the only thing that really matters is to fear God and keep His commandments. That's all. That's it. So we spend all our lives doing everything else in the world except the really thing that matters, don't we? We get all wound up about everything else in this world that doesn't even matter. Now, you got to be careful with this because you could go into depression. If you're like me, you'll slip right into depression because when you go home and you work, you mow your grass, for what? It's just going to grow next week again. And then one day it's going to catch on fire. Why even mow it? Well, there's a whole idea of keeping ourselves busy, which is good for us. But Solomon's saying, don't put your focus on worldly things because they don't last. The number one priority in anyone's life is to fear God and keep His commandments. That's our whole. That is and it's interesting, the word duty in the Old King James is supplied. That's really the whole of man, not the whole duty, the whole of man. That's what we were made for. And folks, that's why when people don't serve God, you look at them and you say, man, they have a successful life. They're doing great. You know what? You can't see it, but there's a hole inside their soul that cannot be filled with anything but God. And I guarantee you that's true of everybody. They could try to fill it with money. We're going to see it. When you get money, what do you want? Every one of us are like that. More money. I guarantee you walk out of the parking lot tonight and you see a $5 bill laying on the ground. You won't grab it and look straight ahead. You know what you'll do? You'll do exactly what's natural. I wonder if they dropped another 5 somewhere, huh? Why? Because it's like that. You eat some food. I love this illustration. You eat a little bit of food. What do you want? You want more food. There's nothing in this world that satisfies. There's a hole inside of us that only God can fill. And it's sad that our young people are being duped every day. They're being lied to. Go after this, go after that. And you know what? If you go after that, young people, listen to me, you'll have a hole in your soul. And the problem is, you look at the majority of people and you say, Dad or preacher, you're wrong in that because everybody's doing it. And I'm telling you what, everybody might be doing it, but everybody has a hole in their soul. If they don't fill it with God, they are empty. That's why you see so much hatred in our world too, by the way. It's one of the reasons people can't get along. Because inside they've got so much turmoil, they've got so much hate, they've got so much frustration. Why? Because they can't fill up their lives. It doesn't happen without God. All right. That's the approach. So what are you going to remember as we go through the book? Vanity of vanities. Everything's vanity, says the preacher. Under the sun. I mean, if it's under the sun, it's probably not worth much. Life without God, you may as well live it up because there's nothing more. But life with God, fear God and keep His commandments, that's the whole of man. And we're going to see it unfold as we go through the book. All right, so what's the aim? What is the aim? Which kind of goes with the approach, but a little wee bit different twist. Vanity of things under the sun, that's the aim. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, as near as I can tell in my study, Solomon identifies 18 vain things. This is what I want to look at tonight. We will go into these in a little bit more depth as we go into the outline, but I want to look at some of these vain things that he talks about. Okay, let's look at chapter 1 and verse 14. Chapter 1, verse 14. I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and striving after the wind. So what essentially he's saying here, I've seen what men do. And I want you to think, let's think on a more current time frame. We see what men do. We see bridges constructed. We see houses constructed. Now, this isn't always the case that we see in our lifetime, but how many houses have you seen being demolished because they're just simply wore out? They're just done. They just, wrecking ball comes in. Trying to think, there was something knocked down right beside McDonald's, some big building over there. Did you see that right there on the strip? Something knocked down. Pulled in there one day for coffee, and I was like, whoa, wait, what is that? I didn't even realize there was a building there. Now it's not there. So they tore it down. Why? It's just no good anymore. Whatever happened, it's no good. They tore it down. Solomon says, I've seen that stuff. I've seen the works of men. I've seen how they build big cathedrals and big bridges and big buildings. He said, you know what? It's just like striving after the wind. Under the sun, the works of men, what really lasts? What really lasts? In the spring, I'm going to put me a pasture field in. I'm going to put locust posts in because they last a long time, but they don't last forever. One day, I'm hoping to get through the majority of what I care about in my life, and then somebody else can come in, Joshua can come in, and he can replace them. But my point is this, someday they'll be replaced or pulled out and forgotten about. That might turn into a subdivision someday. It was a pasture field for me, it turned into a subdivision, so I hope not. But it might. Why? Because he's seen all the works of men, and it's vanity. What you do doesn't last. Second vain thing is pleasure. Look at Ecclesiastes 2 and verse 1. I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So enjoy yourself. And behold, it too was futility. I think most of us can relate to this. Go on vacation? You like to go somewhere? You go on vacation? How does it feel when you leave for vacation? You excited? You enjoy it? You pack up your clothes. No dirty clothes. You got all clean clothes in the suitcase. You put them in and you gas up the vehicle. And you have your routine, whatever you do. You go around the house and make sure everything's locked. And you get the kids packed in or whatever it is you take with you. Maybe your dog, whatever. And then, if you're like me, about within 5 minutes of leaving the house, you're stopping because you forgot something, you're coming back and getting it. And then within 10 minutes, you're stopping to get a cup of coffee because you forgot to grab your coffee that was on the kitchen counter. So you're getting this and you're going on vacation and it's exciting. You're having fun. And then Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday come if you're really blessed to get 5 days. And you come back on Saturday and what happens on Monday? Alarm clock goes back off. What happened to the pleasure? How do you feel on Monday morning going back to work? How many people love to go back on Monday after a whole solid week off? Man, I'm telling you what, worst feeling in the world. It's funny to hear our children say that. I don't like to go back to school after I've been away. I don't like to go back to work after I've been away. I know the feeling. Why? Because pleasure's exciting, but it doesn't last, does it? It doesn't last. Man, I wish we could just tell our world this, and I wish every one of our young people would understand this. And I can't help but think of this in context of what I preached on Sunday. And when we're talking about people keeping themselves pure sexually, pleasure doesn't last. If you young people decide to cross that bar and have a sexual relationship before marriage, I'm telling you, you're willing to sell your purity and your soul for what? For an evening? It won't even be an evening. It'll be a portion of an evening. And in the stress and the problems that come with it, you won't even enjoy it. Pleasure. Go after it. Just live it up. Solomon said, I tried that. I tried that. We're talking to a man that tried it. I mean, he had sexually any partner he wanted. Think about it, 1,000 women. 365 days in a year, you do the math. He said, I'm telling you, pleasure's not where it's at. It's not life. It's not where life's at. But you know what? Every one of us can get duped into that, can't we? Well, if I just have that great big game day, that fun day, pleasure's no good under the sun. Look at third one, profit from one's labor. Chapter 2, verse 11. Then I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted, and behold, all was vanity and striving after the wind, and there was no profit under the sun. He said, man, I'm telling you what, I got so busy and I did all this work, and it's just not any good. It doesn't do any good. The works of men, the profit from one's labor, it isn't really worth all that it's cracked up to be. Now again, I told you when we're going through this, at first, then you can understand already probably why some people think, oh, this is a depressing book. Thanks a lot, Rodney. Come out here on Wednesday to be encouraged. And boy, you're really just sacking the enjoyment out of my life. I'm not, because what it's going to do is it's going to open up and it's going to show us what's important. The problem is we don't face these things a lot of times as humans. We think life is in everything else but what it really is in. And our whole world thinks that. The whole world thinks it. And I'm telling you, and young people, I'm talking to you for a minute because you guys have your whole life ahead of you. And I'm not picking on you. But you guys are going to be picking careers. All of you young people will pick a career. Tell you, what career do you want to pick? I want to pick a career where I can make, $300,000-$400,000 a year, Rodney. I'm telling you, a career that helps people is a career you want to choose. Now, I'm not telling you what to do for your life's work, but I'm saying because you have to get up every day and do something, you may as well do something you absolutely love and that makes a difference. Now, I've been there. I know the crossroads. I know where I've been. And I know one thing. There's so many great jobs out in this world where a Christian can really shine. And I'm talking, we have some that have done it. We have nursing fields. I mean, a Christian nurse, a Christian school teacher. It kind of bums me out about teachers a little bit because sometimes when I hear teachers, they talk to people that are thinking about becoming teachers and they say, oh, it's not what it used to be. It's really hard. Listen, nothing's like it used to be, right? This world is hard. But what do we need in the school systems? We need Christian educators. Right here in Selinsgrove, we need Christian educators. We've got so much debacle in that school system right here in our community. Ungodliness right here in our community, I have no problem saying that publicly. I can point to some of it. I can name some names if you wish for me to. It's nothing but sin. We need some light in there. We need some salt in there. We need some people to say, no, that's not right. We need some people on a school board to say, that's not right. That's what it matters what we do. Solomon's saying, if you just live for yourself, your profit matters nothing. So do something that makes a difference. All right? Number 4, the quest for wisdom. Wow, this is great, Solomon. Chapter 2, verse 15. Then I said to myself, as is the fate of the fool, it will also befall me. Why then have I been extremely wise? So I said to myself, this too is vanity. Now, what kind of wisdom is he talking about there? Worldly wisdom. Worldly wisdom. It's amazing to me how this just comes to light. Have you ever seen somebody that's like a super intellect? There's a fellow right now. I just watched a little bit of his speech. The guy is a genius. The guy's a genius on this abortion class I'm taking. We were made to study a little bit from this genius. He's a genius. The guy is so smart, I can't even believe it. He uses words out of a dictionary to follow. I mean, the guy's really educated. Doesn't know how to teach, because teachers that are really educated bring it down where the calves can get it. I'm a calf and I couldn't get it. So I know he's not a great teacher. But the point is this. He uses this intellect. You know what he uses it for? He has all this wisdom. You know what he tries to promote? Pro-choice. He's so smart, he doesn't even understand that it's a sin and wrong to murder a baby. He doesn't get that. He's so genius. He's got all this wisdom. Man, I'm telling you, worldly wisdom profited that man nothing. Solomon said, I had wisdom. I knew how to do things, but he said it profited me nothing under the sun. Next one. Let's see. Number 5, the focus on earthly accomplishments. Chapter 2, verse 21. When there is a man who has labored with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, then he gives his legacy to one who's not labored with them. This too is vanity and a great evil. You know what he's saying there? You work your tail off for something, and then your kids end up getting it, right? And that's the godly parents want. We want to give our children something. I understand that. But this has kind of hit me in past years, recent years. Some things I've had, and then I've been through people's estates. I've seen their tools that they've spent $500 for go for $20 or $30, and they barely got that. Sam's seen that too. Auctions, you see it all the time. They'll sell whole boxes of stuff. I mean, Mama's pride and joy in a box, $5. Mama worked so hard to fill that box up with stuff, and now it's going for $5. She worked her tail off, and it's going to somebody else who didn't even work for it. That's what he's saying. Now again, remember this, under the sun. This is a person who's just striving to fill up their life with things, material things. He said, what's it going to benefit you? Where's it really going to take you? All right. Any questions on this? You're not depressed on me yet, are you? Not depressed. All right, let's lift it up. Come on now, we're gonna journey through the book. It's going to get better, I promise, I promise. I told you, it's a little melancholy to start with. Number 6, an overemphasis or misemphasis on life and living. Look at chapter 3 and verse 19. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. One dies, so does the other. Indeed, they have all the same breath, and there's no advantage for man over beast, for all is vanity. Now, keep it in its context. He's basically saying death comes to everybody. Your dog will die, and so will you. What profit hath that under the sun? Is there any profit to dying if you're not in Christ? People hang on with everything they have because they don't want to die. You know, a Christian views death. It's but a step. It's but a step. I'm looking forward to that step because I get to go to my reward. Payday, if you want to look at it that way. Reward day, crown day, I get it. I can understand that. And I'll tell you, it takes a little bit. It takes a few years sometimes for people. So don't feel bad, young people, if you're like, man, I don't believe that. I don't really understand. Because you're at the prime of your life. You want to look ahead. That's good. That's a healthy thing to look ahead. I didn't want to think about death when I was younger. But I'll tell you, the older I get, the more I see the world, I'm not all that really discouraged about death. I'm kind of looking forward to it. Now, I'm not saying, God, take me tonight. Because I do have a few things I want to accomplish yet. I have a little bucket list. But if I don't get the bucket list done, it's not really going to matter, is it? Somebody will just I was going to say somebody will just kick the bucket, but that would have been a bad phrase. Somebody will kick my bucket, right? If I fill it up with goods, they'll kick it anyway. It's not going to matter. So what? Live your life for God. That's the story. All right. Competition, chapter 4 and verse 4. I've seen that every labor and every skill which is done as a result of rivalry between a man and his neighbor, this too is vanity, striving after the wind. I had a neighbor one time when I was growing up. He was so concerned about 2 foot of land, literally a push mower's width. If my mother told me to mow it, I'd mow it. I wouldn't even get halfway through. He'd come out there steaming. You could just see the smoke rolling out of his ears. It was actually my mom and dad's. They had it surveyed, and the pins were there. But that old boy would not listen to the pins. He would not follow the pins. Well, he was an old man. It really didn't matter. Dad said, just don't mow it. Just mow on this side and don't worry about it. So he would mow that strip. If he heard me start the lawnmower, he'd run over there and mow that strip first. You know where that old boy is today? I mean, he spent hours fuming about that. I'm talking my whole childhood. He fumed about it. My whole childhood. He's dead. He's gone. All those years of fuming about it. What did that do him? You know, my parents still live there. One of these days they're going to die. You know what? Those 2 properties may be sold together and somebody may own them both. It may grow up. Nobody may mow it. What's it matter? Why'd you fume about it? Doesn't matter, does it? That's what he said. He said the competition, the rival between a man and his neighbor, going back and forth. He said it's not worth it. Really makes you put focus on what's important, doesn't it? Absolutely. All right, let's keep going. Stockpiling riches, chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Then looked again at vanity under the sun. There was a certain man without a dependent, having neither a son nor a brother, yet there was no end to all his labor. Indeed, his eyes were not satisfied with riches, and he never asked, and for whom am I laboring and depriving myself of pleasure? This too is vanity. It's a grievous task. Do you ever notice how quick money goes? Does anybody else have that problem? I mean, it just seems like you can't hold on to the stuff. It's like, it just seems like it's gone. It's like it goes so quick. And it seems like if you get a little extra, you need something or something breaks. That's okay. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying you're not going to hold on to the money. It's just not going to you're not going to keep it in your grasp. So don't try. He said, I'm telling you, you're like wasting all your life, all your kids' lives, working your tail off. And he said, what's it doing? What's it doing for you? What's it doing for you? All right. Trying to please everyone. I love this one. Number 9, chapter 4, verse 16. Preacher, you need to read this twice. All right, I will. There is no end to all the people, to all who were before them, and even the ones who will come later will not be happy with him. For this too is vanity and striving after the wind. He says, if you try to please everybody, forget it. You won't do it. Now, I'm going to read this again to myself, okay? Because I need this. If you're like me, if you have the personality like me as a people pleaser, you lose sleep if you can't please people. I got a little story for you. Actually, it's not a story. I'm going to cut to the conclusion. You can't please everyone. Now, when I say that, I'm not preaching at you. I'm preaching with you. I'm more preaching to myself. You can't do it. There's going to be people that are going to get upset from time to time. You just can't bend and shape to everyone. You have to have some scruples about you, and you have to be kind, but there are times you have to draw boundaries, and there are times you just can't please everyone. And that's what he's trying to say. If you're like me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not a people pleaser, then you probably don't maybe know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, that's good. I wish I was like you, but I'm not. So, all right, let's keep going. Number 10, the foolish use of words and promises. Look at chapter 5, verses 4 through 7. When you made a vow to God, don't be late in paying it, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. It's better that you should not vow than that you should vow and not pay. In other words, what's vanity? What's vain? What's useless? Making a vow and then not carrying it out. Saying something and then not doing it. Now, there's a difference between not being able to do it. You say something, I'm going to try to do this, and then something comes up. And there's a difference between that and just throwing rash things out. You know, yes, I'll do that. I need to sit down and somebody needs to come up here and tell me this. Yes, I'll do that. And then you realize on your schedule there's no feasible way you can do that. And so you need to stop and think before you say something. before you promise something, stop and think. Stop and think about it to make sure, can I carry this out? You know, there's even a principle there when it comes to serving Jesus Christ, isn't there? Remember the story? Jesus said, you know, there's not a man that builds a tower until he sits down and sees how much it's going to cost him. There's not a king that goes to war without seeing if he can really take that army over there. The implication is, can I really do this? Am I really willing to give my life to Jesus Christ? Am I willing to do this? Don't vow unless you're willing to do it. And it's amazing that Solomon would say that here. Number 11, money. Chapter 5, verse 10 through 12. He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves abundance with its income. This too is vanity. When good things increase, those who consume them increase. So what is the advantage of their owners except to look on? The sleep of the working man is pleasant, whether he eats little or much, but the full stomach, the rich man, does not allow him to sleep. I'll tell you, I knew a man one time, he was a preacher, and we'll end with this. He was a real wealthy preacher. That doesn't happen very often. But what happened was young in life, he invested a bunch of money before he was a preacher. He invested a bunch of money and he got rich. He was very young. He was like in his 30s when he retired. And he had stocks. I mean, this guy was pretty genius on the stock market. And I was talking, he was a New Testament Christian. He was a gospel preacher. And I was talking to him one time, and I said to him, man, I would love to be in your position. Not with the money, but it's nice because, man, he can just travel and preach. He just preaches what he wants to preach, where he wants to preach. He just goes and does it. He doesn't have to really worry about expenses and everything like that. And he says, no, he said, I wish I was where you was. You wish you were where I was. You don't want to be where I'm at. He said, yeah, I do. He said, you would not believe the stress I'm under to, number one, check my stocks every morning, every day. He said, I'm on my computer all the time checking stocks. If they drop, I'm stressing. He said, I'll be writing a sermon. My stocks will drop, and I'm over here, and I'm checking this, and I'm checking that. And then he said, you just wouldn't believe the people that think because I have money that I have money to give to everybody. And so he said, there's people all the time knocking at my door saying, hey, I need this and I need that. Instead of asking the church, they ask me. He said, I can't help everybody. And he said, and he went on and told me some things that was really hot. I thought, you know what? That's something to think about, isn't it? That's something to think about. The love of money is what he's talking about here. That's what our appetite's for. He said it really doesn't ever get filled. Any questions or comments? All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you guys 12 through 18 on those vanities. Go ahead and look at those this week. So you got two little wee homework assignments. 12 through 18, look at those, read those passages, and read the first 2 chapters of Ecclesiastes. Real simple little homework assignment for next Wednesday. And then what we're going to do next Wednesday is we're going to jump into this outline. And let me go ahead and give you those 3 points if I might, and then that way I'll just start a new outline next week. It'll make it easier on James that posts it, and it'll make it easier on you too when you come in. Here are the 3 major points we're going to deal with. I apologize if you put your stuff away, guys. I'm sorry. I just looked at that and I thought I don't want to pull this outline out next week. Number 1, consideration. Consideration, chapter 1 through 6. Consideration. What Solomon's going to do, he's going to sit down and consider his life. He's going to look at it all. He's just going to consider what this is all about. Number 2, counsel. Chapter 7 through chapter 12, verse 8, he's going to counsel us. He's going to give us the counsel to really know what life's about. Consideration, counsel. Third C is conclusion. Conclusion. He's going to conclude it all. I don't mean conclusion like I conclude a sermon, here's the end of it. I'm saying he's going to end this whole thrust of what he said in these few verses, 9 through 14. All right? So we have consideration, counsel, conclusion. Write those down. Next week I'll have a new outline for you. We're going to jump in and we're going to dissect the book of Ecclesiastes. We're going to see some great stuff. Thanks for coming to class. I hope you're enjoying it. Don't be depressed because it's going to lead us through a wonderful thing. And at the end of it, we're going to say, yeah, he was right. We're going to live for God. Number 1, 100%. All right? Thanks for coming to class. See you on Sunday.